Welcome to Not Another CEO podcast. I'm your host, David Politis. Every week, we talk to inspiring leaders and get the true stories, the ups and downs, the lessons learned, and come away with actionable advice for our own journeys. Today's guest has been a trailblazer in the voice over IP and unified communication spaces for almost 25 years. He's a serial entrepreneur. His first company was acquired by Yahoo in 2005. When he was there, he created Yahoo Voice. His second company was acquired by Google in 2007. When he was there, he created Google Voice. And his current company is his most successful so far. It's the leading AI powered communications and customer intelligence platform in the world. He's someone I've looked up to for much of my career. Please welcome founder and CEO at Dialpad, Craig Walker.
David, great to be here. Great to see you too.
It's awesome. I've been looking forward to this for years. So let's just jump right into it. So, what is one thing you've done at Dialpad, big or small, that's had the biggest impact, and that you'll absolutely do again if you're CEO of another company in the future?
The one thing we do, in fact, we just had one this morning. But we try to over communicate with the teams, and particularly with teams distributed all around the world. Like, it's super, super important for us to over communicate with them and to like really explain everything we're doing. When I was at my very first CEO job back in 2001, I walk into this all hands meeting, and it was clear to me that those employees had no idea the dire straits that company was in. Right? It was clear to me that like the leaders who preceded me had not shared the reality of the situation with them, and then I had to be the bearer of bad news and the reality check. And if you were recollections of 2001 was pretty grim time, right? Like, companies were going under nonstop. So I kind of like vowed then, man, I'm going to always tell the truth. I'm going to always over communicate. I may not be able to answer every question, but I'm never going to like delude the team. Right. And I look at it as, as an employee, you have one bet, like where you plan to put your work effort are the chips you're putting on the table. So like, if I'm investing my pile of chips into this company, like, you got to tell me how my investment's doing. Like, I got to know how we're doing. So I've kind of always taken that, and I was always shocked that other people didn't do that. So we do this thing called user manuals, which I learned from my friend David Politis, where every single person, when they get hired, they write what's called a user manual, and they answer a number of questions of what their work styles are, a little bit about their background, so you can understand where they're coming from. Really humanize people. Like when you understand someone's background, and like they say, like I came from a very, I don't know, like a very challenged, poor background. Therefore, I'm very tight with budget. Hey, that helps you understand when your budget isn't just getting blindly approved by this person. Like, things like that are super helpful. So I will always over communicate. I will always have open forums. I will always do the user manuals, and always encourage our team to be as kind of like honest and open as possible as well. But like, like, that doesn't mean someone can just walk in and be like, tell me absolutely everything, or are we thinking of doing some strategic acquisitions or anything? Like, we're obviously not going to give away state secrets in this, but we try to be pretty forthcoming.
So now Dialpad, I think, is 1,000 people or maybe over.
About 1,300, yeah.
1,300. So at 1,300 people, and you have offices around the world, literally.
Yeah.
How do you? That's a lot of people to speak to at one time. Is it all at the same time, everyone together? Is it recorded and distributed? Like, tactically, how do you actually do that?
Yeah, tactically. So we have offices. We have offices in kind of like the Western Hemisphere time zone where it works, and offices that don't. Right. So we have folks in Argentina, folks in the Bay Area, Phoenix, Austin, Texas, Vancouver, British Columbia, and Kitchener Waterloo, which is north of Toronto. that group kind of sees the live, like what we did this morning,
Mm.
an hour once a month to talk about stuff. We now do a PM version, or we do a PM version at 9 o'clock tonight that I get to do again tonight at 9 o'clock. And then our team from India, our team from London, our team from, well, in London's tough. Like London was actually on this morning. They
Mm.
could go either way. Team from Japan, team from Manila, they're all on that evening one. Team from Sydney. So we kind of do it twice. We try not to record them. I wish we could, but we give out too much kind of like financial information that we don't want possibility of a recording to get out. Um, but you just got to be really intentional. And the other thing that I do is like I'll travel around and host it from
Oh, I
those
like that.
sites. So today was like the first time in 4 months that I've done it from headquarters. Like last month, I was in Denver, where our customer success org is. The month before that, I was in Austin for the end of the quarter at the end of July. Month before that, I was in Tempe or Phoenix,
Mm.
where our other sales office is. Then I'll go up to Vancouver. I haven't been there in a while. I got to get up there. I haven't been to Argentina in a while. It's a heavy trek to get down there, but it's worth it. You just got to kind of do those things. And then I'm heading out to Manila to see the team in the Philippines. And you just got to kind of like personally invest the time to go make those offices feel that they're loved, supported, appreciated, that they're important, and that they're not, just on the far side of the world and out of sight, out of mind.
And I think specifically from knowing you and seeing you speak and seeing you with your team and everything, you definitely have that kind of, you probably bring that energy to those offices when you're there. So when you leave, people are kind of operating with that energy for months after
Well,
you're
you hope
there.
so. Yeah. I mean, like as a founder, who else can tell the story, like and get them excited. Like, here's why we did it. Let me tell you about the early days. Um, and everyone wants to be part of something bigger than just a paycheck, right? So if you can like help share that narrative and make them feel that, like it's funny, we were talking about it in our dialed in. We call it dialed in. We were talking about it today, and like we had some goals around that new ARR, and I'm sorry, like I don't wake up in the morning and get excited to get out of bed to go to efficiently increase our net new ARR. That doesn't do it for me. But if it's going and making business communications insanely great and showing a bunch of empathy for our coworkers and customers and partners, like that gets me out of bed. Like I'm excited for that. And like it's these little tweaks that, kind of as a founder, even though like I do want to like put together a team and be able to delegate virtually everything, not virtually everything, but a lot to them, you still got to be always keep your hand on the tiller of like, make sure you're getting the messaging right, make sure people understand the mission and make sure they feel, the same connection. And I think founders do that better than anyone.
Yeah, yeah. It's the people. That's where the energy and the soul, I think, of the company. It's like you need to be in front of the team to show them that. So I I first saw you. I met you. I kind of met you. I don't know. It was probably literally 20 years ago when I was in the voice over IP business. You were up on stage. I remember at this conference and you had this long line of people when you got off stage. I got to like shake your hand. That was literally 20 years ago, probably. And you've been in this space for a while. And actually, when you got to Google and you built Google Voice, I assumed personally that you were going to build really what Dialpad is today. I assumed you were going to build that inside of Google. I was at the time at Cloud Sherpas, and everyone was like, "Oh, Craig's going to build this PBX inside of Google." And why did you decide to leave a place with unlimited resources to build it on your own?
Um, yeah, a couple of reasons. One, I loved Google. Google was great. So I'm not, and they're an awesome partner. Um, it's a big company. And this is kind of the fallacy that people have of, "Hey, I'm worried about competing. Like, what if Microsoft were to do this, or what if Google were to do this?" They're big companies, but they don't just like slosh money at every single idea that comes across their desk, right? Like 90% of their, revenue comes from, the operating system or the Office suite, 90% comes from search. That's where 90% of the brain, like in the resources go to as well. So yes, it's well capitalized. Yes, you have great brand advantage, but it's harder to get things done. There's more people where you need approvals from. There's more people who have opinions on what should be done. Um, like it would be nice if they're just like, Craig, here you go, pile of money, and no one's going to bother you. Knock yourself out. Let's see what you can do. And it's not like that. And by the way, that is to a degree what running a startup is. It's like, here's the money, you're on your own, go show us what you can do, which kind of fits my personality a little bit more. And specifically though, with Google, we were going to build this internally. I got moved, like I had transitioned out of the consumer side or the consumer app side, and I was working with the enterprise team, and we were going to build a Google Voice Enterprise Edition, and it was going to be insane. It would have been just like what we did. And in 2010, Google got really obsessed with Facebook, and they wanted everyone to work on the Google Plus social network. And I had absolutely no interest in working on the Google Plus social network. I was a communications guy true and true, and I saw this huge opportunity to make business communications so much better that my co-founders and I left. And God bless Google's credit, Google Ventures made me their entrepreneur in residence, and they let us germinate the whole idea there. And then they funded us and have been a great partner ever since. So they were, well, even though we left the mothership, they were super supportive and helped us get to where we are. So that was part of it. And then, just the end of the day, being able to move really, really fast. And and the ability to move really, really fast comes with being at a startup. Like we acquired, like for example, we acquired a real-time artificial intelligence company in 2018, way before AI hype, way before anyone was talking about it. And I went in, saw, I had never had AI on my roadmap at all. Saw a demo from the founders of this company called Talk IQ. And like I walked down to the meeting, I'm like, on that demo, their AI was understanding a conversation in real time and telling the sales rep, like, here, hey, you're doing the right things you did. Here's how to handle this objection. Here's another question to ask. Man, once you see that, like, I was convinced, like, okay, connecting everyone and making it sound right and making it beautiful and reliable, that's great. That's important. That's table stakes. And by the way, that used to be voice over IP. It's like biggest hurdle. But then you got to just assume, okay, we're going to get there. Everyone's going to get there. So what's the next step? What's the most innovative stuff? I'd never seen anything like the idea of a machine understanding the conversation and making it better. And so like we ended up getting approval from our board to buy that company like within 30 days of that meeting. And like within 90 days of that meeting, they were part of our company. Like we had closed the acquisition. Like that would never happen at any other company other than a startup. And I don't even think it would happen at most startups either. So um, those have been the things that made it. That's why we left Google to do it. Just having that flexibility and just confidence that we know what we're doing and we don't want to slow down to go through a lot of approvals every step of the way to do it.
So you talked about your investors there, the board, you've been in, obviously had multiple companies, and this one you've raised quite a bit of money for. You've scaled it to the largest of any of the three companies in the voice over IP space. How did you choose? Because I assume you got to choose your investors, and in some case, a first time founder, you may not get to choose. You're kind of taking the money that's
Right.
available to you. In this case, you probably chose them, including Google. How did you choose those investors? Like what was your priority when you were looking for them?
Well, I'd say in the what I was looking for changed kind of like as the company matured too. Um, First of all, fundraising is the hardest thing of any, that's job number one of an entrepreneur, right? Your money is your oxygen. There's no guarantee there'll ever be another dollar coming in the door. Do it really wisely and be very, very blessed to be able to do it successfully. Um, All that being said, though, we were fortunate that we had had two exits or previously in the prior 3 years, one to Yahoo, one to Google. So you kind of had a lot of credibility when you're talking to investors, and you had a lot of investors who are willing to meet with you and showed interest. Um, the reason we chose Google Ventures was it was a brand new venture fund. I knew the guys who had started it, uh, you know, Rich Miner, Wesley Chan, Bill Maris, David Crane. I liked them all. Um, and I was their EIR. So it was just kind of understood that they would be the investor for the Series A. Um, but the other thing on top of that, though, they had a really great process of helping you work through your ideas. Like they had designers and UX folks and people who would prototype things for you before you even had that capability on your own team, which I thought was just genius. When we did our Series B and kind of like had built our first product, which was Uber Conference, and when TechCrunch Disrupt with that product, there was a lot of interest. And then we were going, okay, well, let's go talk to like the real of the Silicon Valley and all the tier one names you could imagine. And I walked into the meeting at Andreessen Horowitz, and you're meeting with Mark Andreessen, who at the time was on the board of Skype, if I recall, or had just left the board of Skype. So he understood the space. And you're like, okay, this guy's brilliant. Like, I'm not meeting with the underlings. I'm meeting with the guy whose name's on the door. Oh, and by the way, who invented the browser that made the internet work or useful. Um, and then, but we were talking to some other tier one folks who were obviously similarly very impressive. I get a call from like within the next day, I got a call from our our kind of like liaison at Andreessen Horowitz, was this guy Blake Krikorian. He was founder of Sling, um, and he was kind of like a special limited partner there, and he worked with other funds too. And he had been in the meeting at A16Z, and he's like, "Hey, it's Thursday night. They'd love to meet with you." And I was at some telecom conference down in Pebble Beach, and I'm like, "Look, I just got down to freaking Pebble Beach. Like, we're teeing off at 10 in the morning. We have a dinner tonight until 10 at night." He's like, "The partners will meet you at 7 a.m. in the office at Menlo Park tomorrow. You're out at 8. You can make your 10 o'clock tea time. Can you be there tomorrow morning?" I'm like, "Yeah, I can totally do it." So I wake up at 4:30, get on the road by 5, get to Menlo Park by 7, pull in. The parking lot's full of, I walk into the partner meeting at Andreessen Horowitz. It's like 16 partners at the table, everyone you've heard of. You do your pitch, have your conversation, do the thing. I leave at 8, and then we get a term sheet, I think, the next day or that night or something. I'm just like, wow, that's impressive. These guys are all radically successful people, and still they're working really hard to make this new startup they're in, this venture fund, radically differentiated and show how much in care, and like they're super in it. And when I saw that, I'm like, okay, these are the guys I want to work with. So they really impressed me, and Mark really impressed me, and has been on our board for a long time. And then as we got more and more mature, it was like Iconic Capital has been like our big investor lately, and then Omer's, which is a pension fund out of Toronto. The reasons that I loved about them is they just take a long term view of investing, and we had term sheets from others and other late stage investors, and I won't name them, but one of them specifically said, "Look, we're a late stage investor, and it's a well known fund. It's like, our goal is to hold it for no more than 5 years and to, at least triple our outcome. And that's kind of like success. That's what we're looking for." I'm like, wow, that's affirmatively the opposite of what I'm looking for. Like, I'm like, this is $100 billion TAM. This isn't like an overnight, we're going to triple it thing. This is like, let's put in the foundation to build a company that could literally be massive for a long time and be disruptive in this massive market for a long time. Not like, let's financially engineer, like do some short-term things to make a quick exit. So Iconic, Will Griffith from Iconic's on our board. He's awesome. They're in every great B2B SaaS company, basically, and they take a very long term view of investing. And so that's been fantastic. And then the OMERS, which is the pension fund, Ontario Municipal Employee Retirement System, is same thing. And it's a long term. They're looking for quality investments. These are pension dollars of nurses and doctors and school teachers and firemen and stuff like that. It's like great. Like these aren't telecom or communications is so big. This isn't a race to the next hurdle. This is literally like, let's go disrupt this. Let's go challenge these large legacy folks who have all these, legacy mindset, but they do have a ton of market share to go after. And it's not an overnight thing. So I really was interested in our later investors having that long-term view.
Do you think that you would have had this long term view for this business if it was your first company?
Uh, Good question. Doubtful. Doubtful. I think, like the one of the benefits of having a couple exits beforehand is like you can take that longer term view of look, this is not only probably the most attractive opportunity I've seen, but something that I'm now prepared for. Like I've kind of like made it through junior high and high school. Like this is like my master's thesis type project, and I've reconciled or gotten excited about the point of even though I'm getting up there in age, I've been here for 14 years. Like it does fire me up every morning to come to work and to go after this. And I think that's put all those things together. It's kind of a win-win-win. Would I be able to do that if I hadn't been fortunate enough to have previous successes? Probably not. I'd probably been a little more into, okay, how do we pull some chips off the table? But
Mm-hmm.
the good news is I don't have to now, so I'm all in.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like from the first time we met, post like Dialpad, starting Dialpad, I feel like you've been talking about this long term view for the whole time, and I'm like, I wonder if he's actually like thinking that long term. And then every kind of couple of years, I'm like, it seems like he is. Every next step that you get to, and every
Still doing it. Yeah,
yeah.
it's interesting. There's ups and downs obviously along the way where there's sometimes you're like, God, if I just stayed at Google, man, like the stock's up, I don't know, 800%. I could have just hung out there, but it wouldn't have been nearly as exciting.
What so let's like the early days of Dialpad, like you mentioned, it was Uber Conference was that first product that you had, and that went kind of viral. I mean, for a B2B product, I don't think a lot
Yeah.
of B2B products go viral, and that kind of went viral. Why was that?
It was funny because like it was really funny because it was conference calling. It wasn't video conferencing. It was literally conference calling. You dial a number and you get on a conference call, which, before every single person on the planet had a broadband connection, that's how you got together with people for, dozens of years. That's how you did business. And legitimately, the services prior to Uber conference were so bad. You'd dial a number, you'd enter like a 9-digit code, and then you'd hear a beep, you'd hear a bunch of voices, and you'd just be like, hey, I just joined. This is Craig. Who's here? And then like they'd all say their names and where they're from. And then you'd go through the call. Then 5 minutes later, a beep would happen. Someone else would join. You'd have to do it again. And then you'd hear these voices talking and you weren't sure who it was. And we're like, this is just crazy that there's been zero innovation in this space ever. And so what we did is same thing, you dial into a number, but we got rid of the pin. You don't have to enter a pin. You just dial in and you're joined, which was a big thing because trying to enter a 9-digit pin when you're driving was like a near death experience and the brain cannot remember 9 digits in a row. And then the second thing is we gave you a URL that we could visualize who was in. So I'd see who's on the call already. And when that person's talking, we make them glow. So that guy's talking. And then we'd put their LinkedIn profile. So it's like, not only do I know it's David Politis who's talking, I know what he does and at what company. And like all of a sudden, and then by the way, if someone for whatever reason felt they wanted to secure the conference, you could lock it. You could press a button and lock it. And you could kick a guy out if you didn't know who he was. And you could have like this web control over a telephony experience, which was super innovative. And then we did other cool stuff. We had we had a bunch of interesting features. We had a when we launched, we had this feature called earmuffs. Like I could put earmuffs on you, and then I could talk about you, and you couldn't hear me, and then I could take them off. Um, we had to get rid of it because people couldn't figure it out. And they thought it meant you, and then it was really hard, but it was a cool feature. And then one day, one of my co-founders, this guy Alex Cornell, and Alex was like super creative. He was our design guy, and he was this musician, and he looks like John Mayer, and he sounds like John Mayer, and he's super interesting. And he comes in, and he's like, "Hey, I wrote a song over the weekend and recorded it, and it's called I'm on Hold, and it's a story of a guy waiting for a conference call to start. Do you mind if I play it for you? And if you like it, can we put it in as our hold music?" So so he did. I liked it. We put it in as our hold music, and that thing went viral. Like people loved I'm on hold music. It's still our Dialpad meetings hold music, default hold
Oh,
music.
it's still
And
that
oh
music.
yeah, it still is. And it's amazing. It's when you hear it, you don't realize it's a song about being on hold unless you're paying attention. And like you don't pay attention unless you hear it a couple times. And then people are like, oh my God, that was amazing. And it's just those little things of like why not? Just because it's a business B2B service, it can't have moments of delight. Like that's crazy. Of course it can. I'm the same consumer who then like I'm on a business call, then I turn around and use my iPhone to go do something as a consumer. I'm still a consumer. Like I still get delighted by stuff. Maybe like why would I treat you different? Why shouldn't products be fun and delightful and cool and useful and helpful? And I think that's kind of one of the things I'm super attracted to about going after enterprise business communications because it's like it's been designed by someone who absolutely was trying to take all the fun and delight out of every single product. And mission accomplished, they did. So now we get to create this opportunity for us to come in and put it back in and to make a much better thing.
That was, I think to your the user experience at that time, the user experience, the hold music, all of that. I think that was for B2B SaaS. That your product may have been one of the first to introduce that kind of delight. I mean, now you look at a product like Asana, just as an example, you finish some
Yeah,
task and it's, confetti going all over. And
right,
it's like, but I think at that point, at least for the first kind of chapter of SaaS applications, no one even thought about the experience. We can do it
right,
cheaper, you can access it from everywhere, all of that,
right.
but it wasn't actually the experience. So that hold me, I the first time you kind of wanted to be on hold, like in the very
Right.
beginning, you're like, I kind of
Right.
want to hear this song all the way through,
Right. Well, I used to come to meetings a couple minutes late just so people would hear it. And I'm like, oh, because it was a total like icebreaker. It was great.
um, so let's talk maybe about your team. You've 14 years, you've had a number of executives on the team, and of course, as the company has scaled, you brought in different people. At the early stage, like I'm saying, this Uber conference period of time, what was it that you looked for in someone that you were hiring? Like, what was the number one attribute back then that you were looking for?
Ooh, great question. I'd say and it's kind of hard to tell. But like grit more than anything, because like you were those early days at a company, you're underfunded. You have these big ambitions. You're not going to build like when you bring in an executive, you're not going to build a big team for them. They're not going to bring in an army of folks they've worked with in the past. They have to be able to do stuff themselves too, and they have to be gritty. They got to be scrappy, and they got to care about the right things. They got, which is literally the customers and the coworkers. Um, and and there's these gems, man. Like and we got these gems. Like if I look at our first 10 employees, 8 of them are still here 14 years later. Like that's pretty impressive, right? Like the people who built the foundational stuff, the first database ever built, the first product, the first soft switch, the first anything, those folks are still here with their fingers all over it. And they're now running massive teams and they're they've evolved as well. But we would have never got here if we weren't scrappy and had a lot of grit and had a lot of kind of like just like a common desire to shake things up and to go after this legacy boring industry and really try to make it interesting. Um, but they're needles in the haystack. They're
Hmm.
needles in the haystack. And like the only reason we found one guy who used to work with me at Grand Central, which got bought by Google and became Google Voice. When we got bought by Google, he went to YouTube. And then at YouTube, he met these two guys and kind of like rebels, kind of like, thought the company was too big, didn't like people telling him what to do, wanted to just go do interesting stuff. And so he snagged those two rebels and they joined us. And then Wesley Chan on our, from Google Ventures got us this insanely great guy out of Microsoft who, again, super talent, but inside of a big company that's just kind of
Hmm.
sucking the life out of them. And then they come to a place like this where they're given just a ton of freedom, not a ton of scaffolding, but a ton of freedom. And it's really liberating for the right folks.
And now at the stage you're at, 1,300 people, growing like crazy, big company. What is it that you look for now? And I guess probably at this point you're only hiring the execs. Like, what is it that you're looking for now?
Yeah, for me on the execs now, it's less of that scrappiness. I can learn it on the fly type of a thing, and more of I've seen this before. Because you do want to you don't want to just make want people to be making mistakes of like not mistakes of like, hey, this this might make sense. Let's try it. It's nice to have some pattern recognition. It's nice to have real experience. Um, and there's a that doesn't mean they have the right answers, or it doesn't mean what they've done before will work here, but it does give them like a point of reference to come from,
Hmm.
and that experience is important. And it's a tough balance because you don't want to just you don't want to load up with a bunch of end of career type folks either who may have lost the spark or the spring in the step. So you got to find the people who are still fired up to get out of bed in the morning, still fired up on the mission, still, excited about the ability that will give them a lot of creativity to do stuff, but hopefully actually have some experience in having
Hmm.
done it.
And can see around the corners, right? I mean,
Right.
basically, yeah.
Right. And I think, like when you see companies grown, we've been similar, there's turnover of executives. We've had multiple CMOs, we've had multiple CROs, and that's to a degree kind of like the level of experience or headroom that each kind of gets to. And at a certain stage, you want someone who has a lot more experience and understands a lot more about the details of marketing versus at an earlier stage, the creativity is probably more important,
Hmm.
right? So it's like it's finding the right folks for the stage you're at as well.
For you personally, given that this is the biggest company you've run, obviously you're at Google, but
Right.
the biggest company you've run, how do you keep evolving yourself to at each of these stages? Is do you have a mentor that you go to? Do you have a coach? Do you just read and is it just natural to you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've never really had a mentor or a coach. I do leverage the board if there's something really on my mind, I'll reach out to Mark or to Will or to Rich and really kind of like because they have portfolios of dozens and dozens of companies. So they've seen, talking about pattern recognition, they've seen others do various things and they know which behavior has turned out better for the majority of them. Whereas like all I have is like two prior startups. I mean, that's two more than a lot of people, but that's still only two. And they both kind of turned out okay. So, but they were much earlier stage. So having someone to talk to is good. I don't do it very often. I do it probably once every couple of years. Um, but as far as I think it's an interesting thing. There's this whole I don't know if you read the Paul Graham thing about Brian
Hmm. Hmm.
Chesky,
Hmm.
Sounder Mode from, the Airbnb thing. I listened to that podcast 7 months ago from Brian talking about how, as a founder of Airbnb, like they had built in like all these senior leaders, and he kind of like, as a founder, he stepped back and let them effectively run the company, and he kind of oversaw it. Um, and his point of view was, look, as a founder, I got to be in the details. I can't delegate this stuff. I got to get in the weeds and figure out what's going on with the product, because I think most founders are product founders, and they really care about the product. The product like live like it's in your DNA, like it courses through your blood. You can't delegate that. So like I can delegate a lot of things. Like our head of marketing is way better than I am.
Hmm.
Right? God bless. Go run with it. Our head of sales knows so much more about sales than I ever will. God bless. But when it comes to product and what we're launching and how it works and how we talk about it and why we get excited about it, yeah, like the founders got to be involved in that. So like I've kind of become less of a meddler into the things where the folks running it are way better than me,
Hmm.
and more of like dabbling, or not dabbling, but in the details of the things that I'm good at. So product I'm really good at, um, being more of a front person for the company, getting on the road, seeing all the employees, rallying the troops, getting them fired up, going and seeing customers, going and seeing prospects, going and seeing partners, going and talk to analysts and go talk to the press. Like those are the things that I'm where I'll add a lot of value, and setting the strategy, because it's like, look, like our mission hasn't changed from day one. Like we want to make business communications insanely great. Like we haven't, I don't think anyone's gotten there yet. I think we're far along. I think we're better than all of our competitors, but I don't think that's anywhere near good enough. I don't think it's not an industry that knocks my socks off of like, look at how great this contact center product is. Like I think a lot of them are terrible, and being better than the terrible ones isn't enough for me. Like I really want to be amazing, and I want people to be like, wow, if you're not using Dialpad, you got to have your head examined. Like it will change your life. That's where I want to get to. Um, so that's kind of like more of my role these days is spend a lot of time on product, spend a lot of time, out on the road with all those various constituencies. But you still have to like you still like when things come up, you got to get involved. Like you can't just delegate
Hmm.
solutions. You got to get involved. And like I'm getting really involved in our pro services now, really involved in making sure when a customer signs up for us, they get a white glove experience being turned on to the product and getting value out of it almost immediately. And I'm like leaning into that heavily, because that is as important as closing a deal, is then getting that customer up and running with a smile on their face as quickly as possible and driving value. And so that's now a real focus. So I think you kind of bounce around to things that come up as things that you think you can solve by digging into. Um, I've never got to the state where everything's just humming so perfectly. All I do is like, check my email every once in a while and just get to go talk to customers. Like one day perhaps, but I think I'll always be something you got to dig into.
I want to tell one quick story because you mentioned being a front man, and you are an amazing front man. I need to tell this story because when Tenshi invited us both to Japan, and we had that big event with all the top CIOs in Japan in Tokyo. There was a big Google event, and he invited the two of us to speak, which for me was a huge deal at the time. I thought this is going to be my entrance into Japan. We have these big CIOs. And I remember that we arrive at that beautiful hotel, had all the round tables, and we're sitting in a room being prepared to be brought in and presented to all the CIOs. And I show up, I'm wearing my jeans, my untucked button down, and I think sneakers. And you were in maybe the nicest suit I've ever seen. You looked amazing. And as we were going in, you said, Dave, listen, when I get up, I'm going to do my demo, and can you just call my cell phone? It'll ring, it'll show up on the screen. Like I said, no problem at all. So we go into that room, we sit down, you're at one table, I'm at the other. I'm preparing myself for my presentation. First time I'm doing simultaneous translation. They had the translator
Right.
sitting in that little room there next to it,
Right.
not room, but like, and then you get up and you walk past me. You're like, okay, cool. You're going to call me. I'm like, yep. And you get up on the stage, you put in your laptop, the presentation comes up nice, and you just start speaking in Japanese. And I will never forget that period.
Wow.
First I got so nervous. I said, was I supposed to learn this in Japanese or something? What is going on? And you kept going. And I thought you were just going to say hi, and you just kept going. And when you stopped, I think it was like 5 minutes in, I was I was literally, the CIOs were all like basically clapping for you. And I'm like, I got to follow Craig now after this. We did the demo. It worked perfectly. We did. And you sat down. You're like, how'd I do? I'm like, that was pretty good. I got up, plugged in my laptop. It didn't even render correctly. My demo wasn't working. Couldn't connect to the internet. I was trying to tell jokes, and the simultaneous translation was happening and no one was getting my jokes. That was my memory where I was like, man, Craig is good. Like that was like a different level.
Well, let me tell you, there've been plenty of bad ones that preceded that got me there. But we were lucky enough that we had a couple native Japanese speakers in the company at the time. So I'm like, okay, write out the first couple paragraphs and I'm just gonna memorize these things. And then it kind of flowed. And it was funny because like people were like, whoa, he does know Japanese. Then the paragraphs came to an end. I'm like, all right, that's all we got. But similarly, I think I was at Google, and so this was like 2008, and there was this event in South Korea, and it was the same thing. And the president of South Korea was there, and it was giant ballroom and this beautiful, beautiful thing, but it was massive, and it was like the UN at the back of the building. There were like 30 different interpreters, and everyone had things in their ears, so no matter what language, they could do it. And I was up on stage, and Tim Draper was up with me, and there were a couple others, but we were going around. So anyway, it's my turn at the podium, and there's one table of Americans in the front, and I'm talking and I'm telling jokes, and I'm trying to tell jokes, and these guys are howling, and the other like 800 people are in absolute dead silence because the translation comes like 10 seconds later,
Exactly.
and then it's not even funny by the time because you're on to something else by the time they did. Man, it was the biggest bomb of a presentation I ever gave. Like the one table of Americans thought it was awesome. The whole rest of the room thought I was crazy. So there've been for every good one, there've been plenty of challenging ones. Trust me.
That one for me, I'll never forget that. One thing I've always wanted to ask you about is the Super Bowl commercial that you guys did. That
Yeah.
was everywhere on the actual for the Super Bowl, and then I feel like I'm getting hit with it on YouTube all the time, and I'm seeing it
Yeah.
again on the. Can you just talk about why do a Super Bowl commercial? Was that a dream of yours, or was that a CMO who said this is the opportunity, and was it a good use of funds and time and energy?
So it was a brainchild of our CMO at the time. And I thought it was a great idea because it forces you to get like a really high quality video production thing that you can use for other mediums. So we spent the money on that. Um, we then launched it during the Super Bowl, but like it's like anything in the world, right? It's a relationship thing. We got to know the folks at Google and at YouTube TV really well. We got to know the folks at you were handling the Super Bowl that year really well at Fox, and it turned out to be a much bigger thing than we planned because just through those relationships we developed, they're like because they have these slots all over the place, right? Like they have pregame slots, they have wrap up slots, they have all this inventory, but it never is like it's never just a perfectly filled thing and every single market has every single slot perfectly filled. They try to, but like if you watch YouTube TV, like every couple hours it'll be like it'll show you like a bee instead of a commercial and like enjoy this zen moment of like watching a river roll by. And that's because they for whatever reason in that zip code they didn't have an ad for that slot at that time. So they just show you like something else. So like we for whatever reason, became friends with the guys who own the slots. So they were slapping Dialpad into these slots all over the place. And so we got so much more coverage than we paid for. And it was a really good commercial. It was about artificial intelligence and how it's the good AI and not the bad AI. And this was February 2 years ago. So this is literally like a month before Gen AI and OpenAI really kind of burst onto the scene. So we were the single only AI commercial in that Super Bowl. And then within like 3 weeks, the whole world was like all crazy on AI. So the timing couldn't have been better. The kind of the exposure was way more than we expected or hoped for. And then you're able to just reuse it on social channels all day long. Like, hey, did you see our Super Bowl ad? Did you see this? And whether we played the ad in their market or not, most people just assume they were in the kitchen, grabbing a drink or some chips, and they missed the ad. So it's like you kind of get credit for having this worldwide ad, even though you didn't pay for the worldwide ad. So everything about it was really good, and it really was a cool thing. And like it's a question of like there's so many ads, there's so much creativity, there's so many like consumer products out there. Do you do a Super Bowl ad on a B2B SaaS product? But it was kind of cool to do. I don't know if we'll do it every year. We did it the following year. We may do it again. I don't know, but it's been really good. It's been really fun.
That's great. Um, you're open, that it's not always up and to the right, and there's challenges. And um, what is the biggest challenge you've faced over these last 14 years at Dialpad, and how did you overcome that, if you did?
Yeah, it's one of those things where virtually any kind of successful company, you take a step back and everything kind of just looks like, of course, it just keeps going. But then you zoom in and it's like a Richter scale of ups and downs. But like, in the whole, it's great. Um, and I think that's true of any, I've talked to a million, you know, founders and entrepreneurs, and they all say the same thing. I'm like, yeah, it looks really easy, but when you get down to the details, there's a lot of hard work behind it. Um, I'd say the biggest challenge or the hardest thing is having the right people at the right time and being able to understand that and recognize it. So, like you may hire an executive, and this is mostly on the executive ranks. You hire an executive and they have this great experience, and they have this great resume, they're great on LinkedIn, their references are great. And then for whatever reason, it doesn't work out for you the way you expected that they would. And as a founder or the operator, like I always thought, I'm like, gosh, that's weird. I wonder, what it was. Um, but then with the benefit of hindsight, you're like, okay, maybe the product wasn't
Hmm.
where I thought it was back 12 years ago. And I remember we let this amazing CRO go, and because we were selling, all it was SMB, SMB. We're just selling SMB, 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 and this was like 2012, 2013. And she's like, well, maybe it's just an SMB product. I'm like, like what? Like, how dare you say this about my SMB product? And it turned out she was right. It took me 5 years to realize that. And she went off to go have just an incredible
Yeah, she's
career,
crushing it. Yeah.
crushing it, absolutely crushing it. And so it turns out she was right. So it's being able to be able to identify what you need when, and not be, particularly when every day it's a bigger company than it was before. And this is the biggest company you've ever run every day. Like being able to identify those breakpoints of like, okay, this type of person is going to be right for the company at this point. And being honest enough with yourself of like, maybe it's not always them, maybe it's me. Um, but I don't know. I saw Mark Anderson wrote something the other day of like, hiring an executive, you're going to be right half the time. You can have a
Hmm.
50% success rate. Hiring an individual contributor, probably 70% of the time. Those are low numbers. And it's like it's really hard to get perfect at that. And I don't think you ever can. And by the way, the bigger you get, the more pedigreed the executive gets, and then probably the more pedigreed the executive gets that you're hiring, the more kind of inflexible they get, or the more they think that they know more than you. So it's like it's a whole delicate dance. I think we're in a really good spot now. But over the last 14 years, that's been the thing that just,
Hmm.
like each phase of the company, you kind of face it again and again and again.
What are you most excited about for the future of Dialpad?
You know, more than anything, I just love that this is such a massive market that every single business needs to communicate with their customers and with their prospects and with, candidates and with, internally. And so it's something it's almost like a consumer product in that it's so pervasive, it touches every single person who works.
Hmm.
And so if you can make the best product that makes those people happy and more productive, that's amazing. So I think we've been really fortunate in that like I wish I could say this was a strategy from day one and this is why we're so smart. But our the thing we did two really smart things. We said, look, we're going to start with this fully modern communication platform that can serve any single type of communication: texting, video, voice, contact center type of, like, all these types of things are just literally routing decisions of how do I get the right two people together on a call.
Hmm.
Like you call a business traditionally, like let's say a receptionist would answer, then patch you through to the right person. You call a support line, they try to, okay, is this a billing question or a product question? They'll put you to the right people. That's really it. It's like, how do we get the right people to the right people at the right time? Um, and then so we have this platform that does all of it. So you don't need, oh, this for conferencing, this for
Hmm.
phone system,
Hmm.
this for contact center, this for my sales team. It's just one. So that one is really useful and powerful. Um, on top of that, we bought this real-time AI company 6.5 years ago, right? Like way before we knew even what we'd get out of it. We knew we'd just be able to understand the conversations. We'd be able to do things like put a CSAT score on every interaction. We knew we'd be able to like determine sentiment. We knew we'd be able to pop up a battle card if someone mentioned a competitor. All those things were like amazing. And we were able to get transcripts, full conversations that you could go search and link to wherever you wanted. That was super differentiated. That just doing that for 6 years gave us this training set of about 6 billion minutes of conversations, and they're all just business conversations, right? So it's not 6 billion minutes of, okay, Google play, the Smithereens. It's literally like long form business conversations. And so sitting on that, having all these AI PhDs, and then generative AI comes out, and there are these great foundational models you can build off of, and then use all that data to train a model to be able to like have a very intelligent, secure, fast, and affordable AI engine in the core of everything you do. Like put that one unified stack, fill it with this real-time AI capability. Like the future is unlimited. Like not only right now we focus on roles. So we have a great sales product, we have a great support product, we have a great recruiting product, and we have a great just collaboration product. But we have enough training data that now we can layer in like horizontally on those industry specific training data models. So,
Whoa.
oh, so this is what it looks like in a law firm. This is what it looks like in a car dealership. This is what it looks like in a retail establishment. This is what it looks like for a dentist office. And start getting really, really, really granular in the models for each one of those verticals. Like, like that's going to be hard for anyone to replicate. Just sending stuff off to like some generic thing that's trained on the internet circa 22, right?
Hmm.
So to me, the most exciting thing is going after this still super legacy industry that's massive and bring just a whole new set of features to it that no one else can do. And that could keep me busy for the rest of my life.
What I want to transition kind of quickly to your background. Did you did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
You know, I went to I went to undergrad at Cal, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to business school. So I went to Georgetown for my MBA, came back. It was late. It was early '90s, '91. Was working at Apple Computer. Then the group I was in got moved to Austin, Texas. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go back to law school. There was kind of a recession going on in '91, so I'm like, I'll go back to law school. So I ended up getting this pretty good education of legal slash business slash undergrad. And then I worked at a law firm in Palo Alto, representing public companies, companies wanting to go public, companies raising private rounds, venture capitalists, investment banks, mergers and acquisitions, all these types of things. So you were in the middle of that whole world. And when I looked at that whole universe of players, like the one that was the most seemed like the guy who was having the most fun was the founder. So so I'm like, okay, well that's kind of like the goal. Now here I am as this lawyer in this universe. How do I get from lawyer to founder? Um, in my path that I thought would be okay, you go lawyer, then you go to investment banker, then you go maybe to a venture capitalist. Maybe that's as far as you can get. Um, but maybe you can get to founder. I don't know how to make these steps, but that's kind of like the journey that I saw. And so I basically, after 4 years as a lawyer, I was interviewing for jobs at investment banks. And I got an offer for an investment bank to go be an investment banker. And I was telling my clients that, hey, I'm leaving to go do this. Here's the transition plan, and here's the new guy who'll be helping you. And one of my clients was this guy, Arjun Gupta, who was starting a venture fund called Telesoft. And Telesoft was all about making investments coming out of the 96 Deregulation Act that basically allowed voice over IP to exist. And and Arjun, he's like, well, don't go to investment bank. Just come work at my venture fund with me. So I'm like, oh, done. Like, skip that whole step. All of a sudden, now I'm at Telesont and we're making investments in like, now it's like 98 and investing in, it was such a heady time in 98 and 99. Like, I think like out of our first 10 investments, like four got acquired, four went public, one went sideways and one went out of business. Like that's unheard of, right? Like it was a crazy period of time. Um, but then the world did catch up to us. 2001 came and money losing internet startups that had just tons of money thrown at them were all of a sudden like about to go out of business because no one was paying the ad dollars for the eyeballs. The models were totally broken. And one of the investments that I'd been affiliated with was this company that had done voice over IP, and they were giving away free minutes to call the US over the internet, but you had to watch an ad on the browser in this little, I don't know what the little bar. Um, and and it had like 14 million users, tons of traffic, but super upside down business model. So they put me in as CEO to literally like try to turn it around or close it down gracefully. And like this is October of 2001. Like you could not raise money for a company. Like it was a disaster. Um, and I made some really tough decisions. I had to let a lot of people go like immediately because like we were on fumes. There was no way to pay them all. Um, and once we did that, everyone worked like the remaining skeleton crew. We worked like, I don't know, like 14 hours a day at least, keeping the lights on, and realized after a month or two, like the users worldwide didn't notice we were just a very small team working on this. And we took the burn from millions and millions a month to like 400,000 a month. And then I found an investor who was willing to give us $5 million, and we took it through a chapter 11 and we got rid of all the debt. We paid off everything and had no creditors and basically started over with a couple $1,000,000 in the bank and just grew that like inchworm, changed the business model. And then 4 years later, we get acquired by Yahoo because by that time we were profitable and we were kind of growing and doing well. And really made me realize like, look, like one, hard work totally pays off. And number two, like you don't have to be crazy. You didn't need like we didn't have a ton of money. We had like a little bit of money, but we just kind of like built properly. So the nice thing is, even though like now at this company I've raised over $400 million, like we still kind of have that like for children of the depression. Like that's a memory I'll never forget. Like I hold pretty dearly on every single penny we have. and make sure our investments make sense. So, but that was this weird opportunity to go from VC to executive or operator.
I didn't know. I actually did not know the beginning of that story. I did not know how you got into Dialpad because it was Dialpad, right? That
Yeah, it was Dialpad. We call it Dialpad One because once we bought the name back from
right,
Yahoo, like
right, right.
15 years later. But yeah, it was a crazy
You're like
time. And it's
literally
funny,
thrown in the fire. I mean, that literally is like,
dude, like legitimately they do this all hands meeting to announce me as a CEO and everyone's clapping. There's like, I don't know, about 150 people in the room. And they thought it was like, okay, some savior came in, like we got acquired. Some savior came in to save us. I'm like, whoa, like this is, I hate to say it, but this is not good news. Like this is, we're going to have to dramatically cut costs immediately. And there's only one way to do that. And like you could hear a pin drop. And so it was kind of a rough way, but it was crazy. It was fun. I remember it was in the offices were down in Sunnyvale and or in Santa Clara actually. And then we moved up to Milpitas, but they were in Santa Clara. And I'd be driving home and there was literally no Bay Area traffic for me because I was driving home at midnight every night. I'm like, this is like this. There, I don't know why everyone's complaining about the commute here. This ain't bad at all. But legitimately, probably for 3 years straight, we didn't leave the office before 10 o'clock at night. And I'm not talking just me, but like Vincent Baquet, my head of product here and my co-founder at Grand Central, like he was my wingman there. And we were in it. Like there was no option. Like, like there weren't other hot startups to go to. I had quit my good law firm job. My venture fund was no longer making investments. Like this was it. Like we burned the boats. You had to see it through and it turned out okay.
I mean, you have a crazy work ethic. Obviously, you're on the plane all the time. You also have a family, and you've kind of that family has grown over those years as you've been building these companies. Do you have work life balance? What does work life balance mean to you, if it if it even exists? And maybe in all of that, how much is your family kind of part of the businesses that you build?
Yeah, it's funny. I read this somewhere and I totally believe it. But there's like three things, three buckets in life: work, family, friends. And if you're gonna be good, pick two, right? So like the one that always took the hit in my world was friends because
Mm.
I just didn't have time to go hang out with my college buddies and stuff. Like it was certainly not the time that I wanted. Um, so the way I tried to kind of scratch that friend itch was to have people at work who I was friendly with. And so like work is fun and we have board meetings and we'll go out for dinner afterwards and you go visit the other offices and you have fun, right? Like it's my friend itch gets scratched through work. So one that kind of opened up a little bit of time. Um, Number two, yeah, when the kids were young and my kids were born in 99, 2000 and 2003, and that was in the heart of that terrible, real hard work period. Um, and and yeah, very rarely was I home for dinner. But I did coach their little, like when they got a little older, coached little league, coached soccer. I remember when I was a lawyer in Palo Alto, that Larry Sonsini, the founder of Wilson Sonsini, the biggest law firm in Palo Alto, was still his son's soccer coach. And I'm like, okay, well, if Larry Sonsini can find time to coach his kids, I'm going to find time to coach my kids. So I always kind of figured out a way to do that. But yeah, did I miss a lot of dinners? I missed a ton of dinners. Like I missed it. Like I'd come home, even if I came home early and I'd get home by like 7:30, it was too late. Like the kids are already doing homework or whatever. Um, but we always spend a lot of time doing good vacations, go to Tahoe together, do a lot of things together, do sports together. And we're really, really close now. So I couldn't imagine it any other way. But I'm sure in retrospect, someone would be like, yeah, I didn't really see you all that much. But right now, and now they're in their 20s. So they're kind of like off on their own journey. And it's now,
Now
my
they don't
wife.
have time for you.
Yeah, exactly. If only. They come home all the time. Like just when I get the place clean, they start showing up.
Last question for you. What is something new that you've learned about yourself in the last year?
Last year. Yeah, so I think one of the things I've learned is I feel confident that I can understand virtually any problem, even if I don't know anything about that, other than like core engineering stuff.
Mhm.
But what I found is like most challenges or most issues in an organization, they're all just human dynamics type things, and it's like, have you created the right motivations for folks? Have you, do you have the right structure? If there's tension in a part of the organization, like what's really causing it? Is it like, and so I've spent more time kind of like digging into, hey, this, like you have a pretty big org. I have 12 people on my executive staff that all kind of report to me with different things. I would love to say it all 52 weeks out of the year, all 12 pistons are humming perfectly, but they're not. Like, there's an issue here, there's an issue there. And over the last year, and probably a little bit before that, I really kind of like dug into what those issues are. And yet, yet to get to a point where like I can't solve it. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? Like
Hmm.
I feel like really comfortable and confident. Like I've been doing this now since, I don't know, 2001. I got 23 years under my belt of running companies. So I feel like I'm really good at being able to get in and solve it. But in the past, I probably wouldn't have had the confidence to go try. Like, what do I know about XYZ? But it's at the end of the day, it generally, you don't need to know a whole lot about XYZ, but you're able to say, okay, like, what are the metrics we're measured on? What are we trying to achieve? Are we doing that? Where's the tension? Why is this? Are we, are our incentives aligned? Why does this team seem to think this team's not working well? What's really going on under the covers? Like you can solve all those things without knowing anything about the actual topic at hand.
Hmm.
And so I've really kind of got a lot more confidence in being able to sand down any rough edges in the organization.
I like that a lot. Craig, thank you so much for doing this. It means a lot to me, and I think people are really going to enjoy this story and your background and all the advice you have to share. So, thank you very much.
David, it is wonderful to see you again. In 20 plus years of friendship, I appreciate it, and look forward to 20 more.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you enjoyed, please share this with your networks, like, subscribe, and we'll see you for the next episode. That's a wrap for this week's episode of Not Another CEO Podcast. Thanks for joining. For show notes and more, please visit notanotherceopodcast.com. We'll see you next week.